All right, my computer has turned over the time to 7 o'clock. So what I'd like to do is call the planning board meeting of Tuesday, September 26, 2023 to order. Karen, could you do a roll call of the members present, please?
Mr. Bob Doherty,
Here.
Mr. Jim Callahan,
Here.
Mr. Kevin Donovan,
Here.
Mr. Dave Edmonds. Is he absent?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gosh, she is. I'm sorry.
Miss Carolyn Turner,
She's on her way in.
We will give
oh, here comes
Carolyn
Dave.
a moment.
And so is Mr. Edmonds.
All right, Carolyn, you are now present.
I am sorry, I'm a minute late here.
No worries.
Good evening, everyone.
You didn't even miss roll call.
And
All
Mr.
right.
Mr. Dave Edmonds,
Yeah.
Mr. Mike Ventresca,
Yeah.
and Chair Claudia Bogan.
Here. All right, first on the agenda, we have no subdivision approval not required plans. So I'm moving straight to subdivisions. First on the agenda is Highview Estates update on pending litigation, and the applicant is Sanco Builders. And I see both Attorney Jane and Mr. Santullo here. So Attorney Jane, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, Madam Director. So we don't have a ton of substantive information for you right now, but we do have a final, not a final, but we do have a new draft of the settlement agreement to take back to Eversource. So we'll be doing that in the next several days. I do think we have a decent chance of getting to resolution in the next couple months. But one way or another, if we don't, there's going to be a trial in early January, and the matter will be resolved that way. So, so one way or another, we're either gonna have a settlement agreement, or we're gonna have a judgment from the court with regard to Eversource. And so, in light of that, I think it's prudent that if we reach a settlement agreement in the next few months, obviously we'll update the board in writing. And if you'd like to, subsequent to receiving that writing, schedule us for the next meeting at which you'd like us to appear, we're happy to do that. Otherwise, we can, you could schedule us for February, and we could appear then and give you an update.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Attorney Jane. Does any planning board member have any comments or questions for the applicant or his counsel? So, Attorney Jane, I did pull the docket today just to see what was going on, and not that I wouldn't, of course, take what you said at face value, but I was just curious. And what I saw is that there hasn't been any activity in that case since April, that there was a final pretrial conference that's already been held, that they just went ahead and scheduled it for, a final conference, January 2nd or so, and then a trial on like January 4th. Is my understanding correct that there literally won't be anything going on in the court case until you, a couple days before this trial, show up and get things started?
Yeah, that's not unusual. I mean, once there's a final pretrial conference, it just depends how the court is going to schedule things and what the needs of the parties are. So there could be certain motions filed in between the pretrial conference and the trial. Otherwise, there isn't going to be much activity on the docket until December, when pretrial motions and filings will be due. So the court doesn't really get involved, in the litigation unless it has to pass on a motion, schedule something, or try a case.
Okay, because the reason that I checked that out was just to see what would make sense, whether it made sense to schedule you guys to come in on a December date, or to schedule you guys to come in after this stuff either happened or didn't happen. And so I guess that's the question that I'm throwing out for my fellow board members is, given that there's not going to be much happening on this case until either you guys get a settlement right before trial, or there's a trial, does it make sense to have them come back, first meeting in January or second meeting in January to say, hey, which way did it go? Or do we want to see them before? So that's really the question I'm throwing out for folks to discuss.
Oh, Claudia?
Carolyn, yes,
Yes,
go ahead.
thank you. So I'm okay with a January date. However, I do have one question for Attorney Jane. I'm wondering, I believe last time that they were before the board, you were leaning on the hopeful side of, hopeful that resolution would be reached. Is that still the case, and it's just a matter of paperwork and negotiation?
Yeah, I would say I remain hopeful that we're going to settle the matter. It's more than a matter of paperwork because we're negotiating, some substantive terms to the agreement. But I
Certainly.
think, I think there are issues that can be resolved based on my conversations with Mr. Santullo and input from the blasting contractor. So I mean, I think, either January or February makes sense. And if we resolve the matter in the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, prior
Right.
to the holiday season, we can update the board accordingly in writing.
Sure. Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, Carolyn, thank you. Did I see anybody's hand up or, oh, Mike, go right
Madam
ahead.
Chair, yeah, I just have a question to Tina through the chair is I know Council Viola had submitted some correspondences about that site, and this is obviously the ongoing. I mean, the site's been stagnant there, and it's of concern of the neighborhood is the upkeep and all that stuff. So I just want to, if you kind of give us an overview on what the findings were and where do we go from here as far as keeping that site kind of upkept to a certain point. And I know, and I understand Mr. Santullo is not going to invest a lot of money in clearing out anything until this court case is resolved. But at least he's got to maintain areas of where people can get in and out of there and all that. So just if you have an update on that.
Sure. So Council Viola has on a couple of occasions brought to our attention different issues that he saw that in some cases I agree were well, he brought up issues that were potential violations of the SWIP, the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. And in particular, there's been a couple of issues with an existing catch basin on the existing street. As part of the SWIP plan, the developer was required to put a silt sack into that catch basin to keep any siltation that might wash down the road out of the catch basin in the city system. But the silt sack needs to be cleared every once in a while because things, leaves, silt, debris, branches and limbs, those kinds of things end up in that silt sack. So there have been a couple of occasions where, as the board will recall, Mr. Santullo has gone out there and has cleared the silt sack, but felt strongly that it was in fact not anything from his site that was washing down into the catch basin. And we had an more extensive discussion recently because Council Viola did bring it up a couple of weeks ago in an email. And there was debris on the silt sack, but it appeared to be, at least from the photographs, leaves and small branches as opposed to, say, siltation of runoff from a development site running unchecked down the gutter into the catch basin. But I talked to Councilor Viola earlier this afternoon and suggested to him that I think what makes sense is for me to chat with both DPW and engineering. It's a somewhat unusual circumstance in that typically a developer might be required to put one of these silt sacks in, but construction proceeds more rapidly than it is here. And so what looked to me was not debris that came from the development site, but from the neighborhood generally. There have been a lot of heavy rains, a lot of washing down the roads and gutters, a lot of leaves off of trees. You don't know whose trees they are. So I think maybe we need to have the city forces have a little chat about this, where it is a city street. And I think maybe I need to highlight for DPW perhaps the need to maybe go out there and take a look at this catch basin more frequently. It does have a silt sack that is required, by the SWIP, but that is gonna present a short-term challenge until this development is finished and the silt stack comes out, so I vowed to try to work with both of them to make sure that there is a more regular review of that catch basin. They, I think, may be under the impression that Mr. Santullo is responsible for that. But it doesn't appear that anything that's blocking that catch basin now is attributable to him, but we should go out to the site and put eyes on it and try to figure this out. So I'm gonna be working with them over the next couple of weeks to try to solve this on a more permanent basis for the short term.
Thanks, Tina.
You're welcome.
I'm good, Claudia. Thank you.
All right. Are there other board members that have questions or comments? I am looking and I don't see anybody, so if I'm missing somebody, please speak up. We have a expiration of completion date that has expired in May. That's what I see. So Tina, at this point in time, do you have a recommendation for us on how to move this matter tonight?
Yes, I would recommend that the board consider extending the completion date to January 31st of 2024 and scheduling a follow-up discussion with the developer and his legal counsel for the first meeting of the board in February 2024.
And that meeting is, do we have a meeting dates for 2024 yet?
We do not, but quick review of the calendar would say that it would be on February 27th, 2024.
Okay, that is the recommendation of the planning board director. Thank you. What is the will of the board? Is there a motion or further discussion?
Excuse me, I apologize for this, but the first meeting of the board in February is actually February 13th. My apologies.
All right, February 13th. All right.
Yes.
Okay. With that amendment to the recommendation, what is the will of the board?
I'll make a motion to accept the director's recommendation.
All right, there is a motion for Bob on the
Second.
table. Is there a second?
Dave, second.
Okay, Dave is a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing no discussion, I would call for a roll call vote on the motion.
Bob Doherty,
Aye.
Jim Callahan,
Aye.
Kevin Donovan,
Aye.
Dave Edmonds,
Aye.
Carolyn Turner,
Aye.
Mike Ventresca,
Aye.
Chair Claudia Bogan.
Aye, that is 7 in favor, none opposed. That motion carries. Attorney Jane, Mr. Santullo, we will see you February 13th and the very best of luck getting the matter resolved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is
Thanks.
Carlson Way, expiration of construction completion date, and the petitioner is Brian Melanson.
Good evening. Can you hear me? It's Attorney Mark Salvati.
Yes, Attorney Salvati, we can hear you.
Excellent. I'm sorry I don't have video. I'm on my phone. And I'll be fairly brief. I think we've gotten this matter to almost the end. I'm going to ask that it be tabled and we be heard at the next meeting. The last couple of things we needed to do was install a bush to delineate the easement, and we put it in the wrong place. And we have since rectified that and put it in the right place. We have our no parking sign up. And I think the last thing we need is a certification from the engineer that the subdivision was done in compliance with the plans, which will be provided this week. So I am hopeful that the board will just, I don't think you need to extend the completion date. Just give me a couple of weeks to your next meeting to provide those couple of items. I think we also have to show the bush on the completed plan, but I'm sure Tina will correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Well, and I would elaborate a little bit. So there is one other thing, Mark. There was as-built and an as-built and an acceptance plan draft were provided this morning to engineering. And engineering did report that the acceptance plan is done properly and that the department will be recommending the board accept it. But the as-built plan draft that was given to Greg this morning is exactly the same plan that was given to Greg over a year ago. And in April of 2022, I believe, he wrote an extensive email listing a number of deficiencies with that as-built. It's dated October of 19, but it was submitted, I think, in 2021 and reviewed in the spring of 2022. Greg took a look at that plan submitted to him this morning, and he reports that none of the things that he mentioned in that memo have been added to the plan or corrected, as the case may be. And he also pointed out that the plan showed the easement as having a gravel roadway. And as we know, it did have a gravel roadway until it was covered with loam and sod. So there are some significant, or there are a number of changes to the as-built plan that must be made. And I'm afraid that 2 weeks is certainly not going to be, may very well not be enough for you to be able to get that done.
All right, well, having not realized that, but I do think that Mr. Slager knew of these and perhaps submitted the original plan in error, but I guess if we could go to the second meeting after this one, would
Well,
certainly be sufficient time.
Certainly up to the board, but I'm wondering, given that this has taken so very, very long, if it might make more sense to keep the feet to the fire a little bit, and in fact, put them on the agenda for the next meeting on October 10th. It might be good. It may, if in fact everything, Mark, and we just got the wrong plan today, I know of at least one revision, and that would be the gravel roadway. But according to Greg, none of them were submitted. So maybe there is just a problem with the plan, but that would be a reason to leave you on for discussion at the next meeting on the 10th of October. And I'm not sure at this point that I'd extend the completion date any further.
I would agree with that.
That'd be my recommendation, board. I apologize for putting it that way.
All right, so the recommendation would be to table this matter until the next meeting in the hopes that the relative, all the situations that need to be rectified can be rectified by that time.
Correct.
Okay, so that is the planning board director's recommendation. Are there any questions or comments from the board? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to accept the director's recommendation.
All right, there is a motion by Bob on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
by Dave.
All right, second by Carolyn. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I would ask for a roll call vote, please.
Bob Doherty,
Aye.
Jim Callahan,
Aye.
Kevin Donovan,
Aye.
Dave Edmonds,
Aye.
Carolyn Turner,
Aye.
Mike Ventresca,
Aye.
Chair Claudia Bogan.
Aye, that's 7 in favor, none opposed. That motion carries. Mark, we will see you on October 10th.
Thank you.
All right, good luck.
Right.
Next on the agenda is, under subdivisions, is Allen R. Jerish Drive. Expiration of construction completion date, and the petitioner is Doug Ahern.
Yes, members of the board, this updates on me, and so is the further delay. I, in fact, despite my intent, have not brought the developer and the neighbors together to discuss, you will recall, the issue of the street light and the attempt the developer made to come up with an alternative that caused more problems than it solved. And so I really need to schedule a meeting with the neighbors and have not done so. It's my hope, I'd like to just put this on the table, and my hope would be that I'm able to have that schedule and hold that meeting in the next couple of weeks, and perhaps provide you with an update at the next meeting on the 10th.
All right, so that, if the board is okay with that plan, does not really need us to do anything. We will just remove it from the agenda today and put it back on the 10th and deal with it at that time.
That's correct.
All right, what is the will of the board with that? We don't need a formal motion, but unless someone tells me differently, then we will proceed as the planning board director recommended. Dave gave me a thumbs up. Excellent nonverbal cue in this virtual meeting. Thanks. Everybody's cool. All right, let's table the matter until the next meeting. Okay, under presentation and discussion, potential zoning amendments regarding murals. Casey, I see Casey here, and I'm gonna assume, Tina, that this is Casey's baby. So
That's
welcome,
correct.
Casey.
Thanks, I'm back. I'll share my screen. Tina, host disabled screen sharing. Can you let me do that? Anyway, so since our
Okay, I
last
get-
meeting,
Casey, I'm sorry, you are now co-host, so I think that should allow you to screen share.
Yep. Okay. Can you all see my screen okay here?
Yep,
Yep.
looking good.
Great. Well, I'm not sure about the full screen here, but you'll get the idea, I think, enough. So since the last meeting, we took some of your feedback into account and worked with we met again with the city solicitor and the building commissioner to kind of see if we could come up with the best way to move forward. I'll just refresh your memory and bring you through the beginning slides again. You know, this is a key priority of the Woburn Redevelopment Authority for this fiscal year. At their meeting today, actually, they voted to support this proposal, you know, as presented, and was hopeful that you all would move forward with moving this ahead to the city council for some bigger community discussion. This was also reviewed or, you know, identified in the local rapid recovery plan as a priority. And there's also been a growing interest from property owners. I know just in the past week, the building commissioner had to shut someone down from doing a mural since it's currently not allowed. So there's definitely growing interest amongst business owners and property owners. And so we're bringing the three proposals. One is adding a definition of mural to the definition section. I think I missed one. The second was changing the definition of sign just to add a line that says this does not regulate murals. And the third was to change the use table to allow murals in all zoning districts. I think last time there was some concern about regulating murals and content. The city solicitor was pretty clear that a city cannot regulate murals, cannot regulate content in murals without careful consideration of First Amendment rights, artistic freedom, and potential legal challenges. You know, murals are a form of artistic expression and are protected by the freedom of speech and expression in many societies. And so trying to regulate content in mural raises complex issues for cities. I reached out to the planning listserv and heard back from 14 different communities actually that allow murals without any oversight or regulation, and they've never had issues with distasteful or inappropriate content. I think quite the opposite, actually. They all, you know, spoke very highly of their mural programs and were actually, you know, seeking out funding to allow additional murals in their communities. So in those places, it hasn't really been a problem. We also heard concern about the quantity of buildings that could be impacted by murals. We did a little bit of quick analysis on GIS, and it looked like there's 1,400 buildings in the Woburn's 11 commercial districts. And, you know, of those 1,400 buildings, only a portion of them would really be appropriate locations for murals because of things like existing windows, signs, architectural features like columns and poles. You know, I actually drove around, and in some of the zoning districts, it actually was quite hard to find buildings that would make a good case for a mural because of, you know, because of those designs. And then you also have to think about like the life cycle of the building, whether it's because it's such an investment, if the building's, you know, at the end of its life cycle and is proposed, you know, for future redevelopment, that's not going to be an optimal site. You have to think about the lease cycle and where they are, you know, with the existing tenants. So there's a lot of considerations. So, you know, as we move, you know, right now we're still proposing all the zoning or all the commercial zoning districts to allow murals by right. We have a few examples of, oh, here's that slide I was missing. They got misaligned. But obviously, you know, in our downtown, we have the pocket park that we've all identified as a prime site for murals. But there's also a lot of other sites downtown. Here we have the side of the Studio Cafe could make for a nice mural, the side of Roma's, This is the back of the mobile station along the library parking lot. And here we have the side of the Extapa building along Montville Ave. So right now they're kind of just sad blank walls in some of our primary spaces. And these spots could really be activated to create a sense of place within the downtown. But if we move citywide, this was the project that was actually shut down over the weekend. It was 675 Main Street. So that's in the BN zoning district. This is the new Criswell and Clinic medical spa in Central Square. They were proposing a mural there, but were shut down. But that could be a really nice spot as a welcome, as a welcome spot to the center. We also have out on New Boston Street. This is 223 New Boston Street in the IP zoning district. Took me a while to find a good wall out there, given some of the shapes and sizes and architectural features, but this is 223. Right now it's a computer storage warehouse, just to give you an idea of what's out there. We also have 287 Montvale Ave in the BN zoning district. This is the back of the Montvale Mart that's abuts the bike path. This could make a really interesting spot to create some vibrancy in an area right now that's looking pretty sad and run down from behind. And, it does get a lot of eyes on it because of that bike path that runs behind it. We also have Lord Hobo here at 5 Draper Street. This is the IG zoning district. So this is the side of their building in their parking lot. Another example of a place that could really benefit from a little fixing up. And then here's the new Flip the Bird up in North Woburn, 880 Main Street. And this is in the BH zoning district. You can see another blank wall that's not really providing anything to the community. And I think this is the last one. This is on the corner of Main Street and Green Street in the BN zoning district. Another empty space that isn't really doing anything, especially as this is one of our key entry places into Woburn Center. It'd be nice to see a little bit of activation down here. So I just wanted to show you some of those pictures to give you an idea of how all the zoning districts could benefit from, from a mural program. And like we said last time, because of the cost, we're not going to see these pop up all over the city. But I think if we gave interested owners the option, we might see some real investment in their properties. And then just to remind you all, we do have some existing murals in the community. This is 1042 Main Street. This one was allowed because it's in a 40B district. So the Zoning Board of Appeals, gave approval for a mural on their pump house at the bottom of the building. We also have the side of Peppercorn at 318 Main Street, and this one is kind of just a pre-existing non-conforming mural. And then we have 300 Mishwam Road, and this one is in a 40R district, so that's why it was allowed. So there is, some precedent for murals in various zoning districts around the community. And so I guess from you tonight, we're asking for kind of specific feedback to our zoning amendment. That way we can try to move forward and bring this to City Council for some more feedback and public process. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and answer any questions or pull back any slides you might want to look at.
Awesome, Casey, thank you. Does any board member have any questions or comments for Casey? Dave?
Hi, Casey. So
Hello.
I've done a little research since we last talked. So a mural is anything that can be painted or applied to a wall, ceiling, or some other place. And I found out that there are some instances where the mural is actually painted onto some sort of a structure, and that structure is attached to the wall. So it's not actually painted on the wall. I don't know what the structure is. So I'm just going to say, for the sake of argument, it's a piece of canvas or something. What concerned me when I read that, it's a French process, so forgive me for not knowing the exact name for it. But what bothered me or concerned me was because I've been watching, and if there's any attorneys present, don't take this the wrong way, but I've watched a lot of maneuvering over the years with the passing of language, and things that we thought were covered one way turned out to not quite be what we thought. So I was concerned that if an actual mural could be something that was prepared separately and attached to the wall, would that give them the opportunity to add some sort of electrical or mechanical thing. So my concern would be that the language would specifically say that there can be no mechanical, electrical. You follow what I'm saying? So that we don't end up with somebody saying, well, it doesn't say we can't do this. And it is something that does happen in some places of the world. I don't have a problem with murals. I just want to make sure that 5 years down the line, some real sharp attorney comes in and says, well, we think we can do this, and your rules don't say we can't. So just help me with that. So maybe I'm just being paranoid, but it's not just simply something can be painted on the wall. As I said, there's some other process that allows a thing to be created elsewhere and brought in and attached to the wall. So I just want to make sure that can't be something beyond what our expectation is. Okay?
Nope, that's great feedback, because we did leave the definition a little bit open because there are different techniques of making murals. So we didn't want to dictate that it simply had to be painting on the wall. And I know that the method that you're speaking of tends to be popular. It's a little bit less expensive. I know Somerville uses it quite often, and Arlington used it, and then East Arlington mural. But I think we could certainly add some kind of language about, going beyond what the definition intends.
Okay, thank you.
Because Dave, what you're concerned about is that a component of the mural be something that we as lay people wouldn't understand to be a mural, like, for example, flashing lights, for example.
Exactly.
That's your concern, that when we think of mural, we think of maybe generally speaking, something painted on a wall, but something that is non-moving representation of, either figurative or non-figurative art, that it's not flashing lights, that it's not, doesn't have a moving component to it, like a carousel or something like that, something that is sort of a static piece of art, no matter how it got on the wall in the first place. I'm struggling here, Casey, but David, that's what you're thinking of, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think the word static you just used, Claudia, I think that sums it up pretty well.
Yeah. So we'll definitely work on that. That's great feedback.
And the idea of it not being made up of mechanical or electrical or, componentry other than, some sort of static piece of art. That, I think, is the expectation that I'm hearing, at least from Dave, that's what you mean when you say mural, that you have no problem with. You mean that sort of thing.
Yes. I just don't want a surprise.
Yeah, usually surprises in this line of endeavor aren't good surprises.
No.
Right. Okay.
And I understand that I've been corrected for my ugly art comment, but I still think those flowers you showed earlier are ugly, but that's just my opinion.
No worries. No worries.
Madam Chair, I just kind of want to expand on what.
Yep, go ahead, Mike.
Discussion is, as far as I think kind of like what I wouldn't like to see this is my opinion, but would be like a digital image on like some sort of LCD panel or something like that. Could that be considered a mural? I definitely would not be in favor of something like that. Something that illuminates basically, I mean, these flat screen monitors now are just so thin, and it could be applied onto a wall and be considered. I mean, my son has a TV, it's hung up on the wall. It's like a painting, I wouldn't be in favor. So if you could kind of look into that and see what other towns do to kind of eliminate that, or I think it should be, I don't know, but my opinion, it'd be opening, not so much like the intent of what we're trying to do, I guess. I don't know if I made sense, Casey, or not.
Yep, definitely made sense.
Yeah, we'll try to work on something maybe that's explicit about and maybe synonymous in some ways with the term that Claudia used, but something about no animation or, we'll try to.
Yeah, that sounds like it's almost venturing into billboard too. at
Yeah,
that point.
exactly, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Right.
Right.
So what we can do is we'll take this and I don't mean to, any other feedback we get tonight. The thought would be that we'll take a stab at creating the right language and then bring it back to you hopefully for a final time. And if you like it, then we'll, ask you at that point to approve the language and then sponsor it for the further consideration. So you guys will get a chance to see what we come up with before, we actually do anything obviously with it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Are you good?
Oh, yes, I am, thank you.
All right. Does anybody have other comments or thoughts? Carolyn?
Yes, I have a question for Casey. Is there anything in the proposal relating to any restrictions on distance from residential neighborhoods?
Right now, we have nothing in there in relation to residential neighborhoods. Simply allowed in the commercial zoning districts and not allowed in residential zoning districts.
Okay. I guess that's something, I mean, my concern is, again, and I think I may have been the member that raised the issue with the number of buildings that would be commercial buildings that, there could potentially be these murals in Woburn, but my other, obviously, related to my question tonight is how if there's no restriction to residential as far as distance to residential neighborhoods, certainly a concern is, who defines art, what's pleasing to one individual's eyes may not be pleasing to another. And that's certainly one of my concerns. And the second unrelated question is, who would be responsible for maintaining this? I would assume the property owner, and then what happens when that property owner sells? Then what?
Yep, so we did bring up the question of residential with the building commissioner, and I think we went around with it, and right now there's nothing stopping a commercial sign from facing a residential zoning district, so we didn't go any further with that. And we also had the situation or the example of 1042 Main Street, where that pump house is directly next to a residential dwelling. So we didn't pursue it any further, but we're happy to, come up with some language if that's something that you all feel strongly about. I guess we felt kind of strange about it because we don't regulate signs facing our residential districts. And I'm sorry, your second question was about
Maintenance.
Oh, maintenance. Yeah,
Maintenance.
sorry
Yes.
about that. The cat going crazy. So if a mural was funded with city money, like if the WRA funded it or the Cultural Council funded it, typically a community builds in some language about maintenance for X number of years. Typically around 20 years is what they expect a mural lifetime to be. It'd be a little bit trickier to do with commercial if it's, if it's a private building and it's privately funded. It'd be a little tricky to build the language in. I would just refer back to the cost of the mural, and it's such an investment. I haven't heard from other communities there be problems of nuisance or of these things becoming run down and not taken care of just because they are so expensive for the property owner to undertake. And it really would become a blight on the property, and that wouldn't be exactly what the property owner was looking for. That's the best answer I have right now, but we can look into it a little bit further with other communities as well.
Okay,
Tina.
thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of things to add. It is a complex issue to contemplate, Carol, on the issue of distance to a residential district. And in addition to what Casey said, sometimes it's not just a matter of distance to a district, but probably to be more precise, distance to a residential use. There are sometimes places where building facade in a non-residential district might face a residential district, but the closest residence might actually be 100 or 200 feet away across a train track or a street and sidewalk kind of thing. So that made it a little more complex. Also, the fact that even if you get to the if you follow that line and say, okay, I want to regulate maybe distance from a residential use as opposed to a district, then you run into trouble pretty quickly in the BD where residences are permitted on top of commercial. So there'd be a lot of, if you wanted to prohibit it or limit the distance, it could have a difficult effect on areas like the downtown where you might not mind a mural next to a residence. And then I guess the last thing I'll mention on maintenance, and I think Casey did as good a job as anything, and we'll see what we might be able to do with language. But it is a little bit hard to try to mandate maintenance over the longer term and have some sort of a corrective action required, absent some sort of permitting. And right now, the proposal is to allow them by right. If it was a use you were allowing by special permit, you could put some sort of condition on, and I don't know, you'd have some enforcement mechanism at least through the courts, although that's not very practical because what you really want is someone to go out there with a roller and cover it over or redo it so that it looks fresh again. So I'll underscore what Casey said. We'll put our thinking caps on and see if we can come up with something that might address that concern.
Thank you, Tina.
Kevin, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I have a question. What about windows? Would they be considered a wall if they wanted to put a mural on a window? They have like applications that go in windows, and they have someone who's floor to ceiling window on the corner of the building. Could they put it on a window?
In the zoning bylaw right now, there's regulation about the percent of a window that can be covered. So I think that would not allow for the whole window to be covered. Tina, you might know better than I think it's 25% of the window can be covered.
Yes, with signs. But what's interesting, thinking out loud, is that we're also proposing a change to the ordinance to make it clear that a mural is not a sign. So maybe we need to think about that, Kevin, and see if we need to be careful to make sure that it's not in a window, or that somebody takes advantage of it like that, as like you said, a window claim, and call it
Okay.
a.
Well, while we're on the subject, then the window is only 25%, and who enforces that? I thought we had a sign committee years ago. It kind of disbanded. Is that true? Many years ago.
Well, yes, but enforcement has always been through the inspectional services department. But you're right, the city used to have a sign review board that reviewed signs in the BD and perhaps one other district. I'm not sure. But it has not been active for years. There are no current membership on the committee. It's really kind of gone fallow.
Because a lot of businesses have over 25%. And they also have the tube lighting that I thought wasn't allowed. They have the neon style signs that aren't really allowed. Everyone's got those 2-foot open signs. I thought a lot of that wasn't allowed back in the day in the center, in a certain area.
When you say tube signs, do you mean like the old fashioned neon?
Yeah, but now they're like more, not neon, but the same style. And I'm talking on the tube light. I'm talking like the Christmas lights you would put around your deck or your house. A lot of stores that have them around their doorways or the windows, the bright green, purple, whatever they put around them.
Not sure on that, Kevin, but I can certainly check. But I do know all of that. Well, I know at least signage certainly comes out of inspectional services. The lights, I suppose, would be some sort of part of a window, but I'd have to check on that with them as well.
And then the last thing, I know everyone at the grand opening, they put their vinyl sign out, and I get it, you leave it there a couple of weeks. But how long is the window that they have to take them down? Like I'm noticing one example, the Woo Cafe in the center has open for breakfast. It's been on there. It's like a 6x8 sign. It's been on there for over a year and a half, 2 years now. It's kind of getting tatted, but no one's pulling it down. A day
Is it
get
on
a couple.
Is it on the I'm sorry, Kevin. Is it on the building itself or?
Yes. Yep.
on
On
the
the corner of
building?
Con Street and Maine. And Dager's got one on the fence by the My Glass Company. And then they also have one on the Easy Cleaners. I don't know if there's that permitted signs or anyone can just throw them up. I get it for like a grand opening, they put them out there for a couple of weeks, but what's the long
It's my
term?
understanding that because of COVID and the impact it had, small businesses, the zoning kind of relaxed their enforcement a little bit for some of the commercial signs just during COVID. But I know that the building commissioner has mentioned that to me. And so I think it's certainly on his radar as well about addressing. now that, we're coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, the wind sealed signs. I don't want Woburn to become Hampton.
Kevin, we'll follow up with it for sure.
Thank you.
All right, Kevin. Jim, I see your hand raised.
Yes, Casey, murals, does it address politics and advertisement?
So our definition certainly addresses advertisement. Right now, there could be no commercial nature of any sort in the proposed murals. Politics is something that is protected by the First Amendment. So we don't have as much control about regulating the content of murals in terms of political views. But we certainly have built into our definition that, I think it's any mural would be considered a sign if it's related by language, logo, or pictorial depiction to the advertisement of any product or service located at that business. So we have one part of it addressed. I think the political piece of it is certainly more complex because of the protections of the First Amendment.
Well, right now, we're looking to enable a bylaw for the city, so I think it's something that we could put down. This is intended for art only and restrict it. If someone wants to challenge that, they could go right ahead and see you in court. We have a solicitor that's on duty that would certainly represent us and see where the chips fall. But I don't think you want to get down that slippery slope that Dave mentioned, that that fine language that lawyers like to refine their craft in.
Yeah, Tina and I can certainly touch base with the city solicitor and figure out the best way, what is the limit we can push to in the language regarding content.
No problem. Thank you.
I think we're hearing that loud and clear. I know that's the concern. We talked to the WRA tonight too, and content is their concern, but it kind of comes down to at this point, like allowing it or not, because, art is so protected. But we can certainly see, to what level we can include that in our language.
Thanks again.
Okay. Does any other board member have comments or questions for Casey? All right, Casey, that looks like the feedback for the night.
Thank you. Hopefully we have a good
something to-
definition for your next meeting.
Awesome. All
Or
right.
future meeting. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is Planning Board Director Update. Tina.
Yes, a couple of things to mention to you this evening. Our next meeting, in fact, is scheduled for October 10th. As you decided earlier this evening, we'll have Carlson Way on the agenda for an update. And we will also have a public hearing on a newly filed definitive subdivision plan for 43 Pool Street. The meeting is scheduled as an in-person meeting because of the public hearing. Just FYI, we'll also be bringing to the board a Form L, which is a certificate of completion and release of municipal interest in the subdivision performance surety for Baker Way. You took that vote at the last meeting, but we now have a form that we have you sign as a majority of the board members, and then we give that to the developer, who very often will record that at the registry, and we have that in the file as sort of a last record of action of the board. So we'll bring that to you as well. Finally, we'll have the draft minutes for the September 12th meeting. We apologize we weren't able to get them to you tonight, but we'll hope to catch up and certainly have them for you at the next meeting. The one last thing I wanted to bring up for discussion is a request that we received today from the Woburn Public Media Center. Your meeting, as I said, on the October 10th. The one that follows is on October 24th. And apparently Woburn Public Media is going to be having they're going to have to cover a debate, a mayoral debate that night, and a school committee meeting. So they have asked if the board would consider holding the October 24th meeting as a virtual meeting rather than in person. That would allow me to record the meeting, and we do this quite often. We'll share the recording of the meeting with Woburn Public Media, which then posts it to their channel. So unfortunately, because we do not have the capability of doing a hybrid meeting of both in person and Zoom because of limitations in the meeting room in terms of the equipment. They've asked us to consider, the board members rather, consider having the 24th meeting be virtual. The only thing I know that I will want to bring to the board that night is we do have a zoning amendment that's been sponsored by a city councilor at the request of the mayor. He will be asking for an amendment to the zoning ordinance that would allow the installation of rooftop solar systems in the open space district. When the city several years ago revised the zoning to bring it into compliance with state law to be much more permissive about solar installations, we didn't really think about there being any buildings in the open space district that we would want to put solar on. And sure enough, the city in fact has a water pump station and a part of its treatment facility and a new building being designed. And they would very much like to put panels on the roof to collect solar. But technically right now, the way the ordinance is worded, we would need to revise it to allow that. So that is a zoning amendment with a public hearing, but the nature of that hearing might be such that having it by virtual would not be much of a problem.
Okay, so the only action item from the planning board director update is getting feedback from the members as to whether people are okay with having the October 24th meeting to be virtual. Honestly, that sounds fine to me. Does any other board member have any thoughts on the Woburn Public Media's request of us that we have a virtual meeting that night?
That's fine with me.
I'm good with that.
Yep.
Works for me.
Works for me.
Awesome. All right, thank
Thank
you. So if you could get back to them and say we would certainly want to cooperate with their limitations in order to have the best possible public access for all the meetings that are going on in Woburn on the 24th.
Great, thank you. We will.
All right. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes, August 22nd, 2023. If folks have had the opportunity to review those draft minutes, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to accept the August 22nd, 2023 draft minutes.
All right, motion by Bob to accept the draft minutes as submitted. Is there a second?
Second,
Second by Carolyn. Is there any further discussion on those minutes? Hearing none, I would ask for a roll call vote, please.
Bob Doherty,
Aye.
Jim Callahan,
Aye.
Jim Donovan,
Aye.
Dave Edmonds,
Aye.
Carolyn Turner,
aye.
Mike Ventresca,
I have to abstain. I was not here.
sorry. Yeah, Claudia Bogan.
Aye, that's 6 in favor, 1 abstention. That motion carries. Are there other business matters that may legally come before the board not known at the time of posting, Tina?
Not from staff.
All right, then I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn the September 26th, 2023 planning board meeting at 7:53.
All right, there's a motion by Bob to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dave. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask for a roll call vote, please.
Bob Doherty,
Aye.
Jim Callahan,
Aye.
Jim Donovan,
Aye.
Dave Edmonds,
Aye.
Carolyn Turner,
Aye.
Mike Ventresca,
Aye.
and Chair Claudia Bogan.
Aye, that's 7 in favor, none opposed. This meeting stands adjourned. We will see each other on October 10th at 7 p.m. at City Hall in person.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you
you all
very
then.
much.
Thank
Thank you, Tina.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Casey.
Thank
Very
you.
much
Bye.
appreciate the preparation for the meeting today.
Thanks.
Good night.